Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to part 10, the final part of my Kurosawa Before Rashomon series. And today we're going to talk about Scandal from 1950, which was the same year he made Rashomon. This is Eureka Masters of Cinema DVD number 15. This one has a nice booklet, and it has a nice introduction by Alex Cox, who's wonderful as always. This is Kurosawa's protest film against the powers of the press and the kind of celebrity scandal type stories that started. Again, this is a post-war Japan film by Kurosawa. So you still have, shots of slums and ghettos and conditions. Again, it wasn't until 1952 before American censorship was lifted from Japan. This story was kind of inspired by, allegedly Kurosawa was reported to be chasing this actress, and this got into the papers and he became a bit of a celebrity scandal himself. So Toshiro Mifune stars as Ichiro, who's an artist, a painter who's on top of mountains painting. This group of farmers comes over and sees what he's doing and critique his painting, such as, the mountains that he's looking at aren't red, but Mifune says they're red in his mind, and that's how an artist works. And then we hear a beautiful female singing voice approaching. This woman comes up the hill, and unbeknownst to us, she's a famous singer, Mayako, and she's looking to walk to the nearest town because the next bus is 3 hours. And Mifune offers to give her a ride on his motorcycle, and as they pass a bus, the bus has got a couple of members of what we would call nowadays the paparazzi, and they recognise the singer and follow them to the place they're staying at, obviously in separate rooms because they don't know each other. But Mifune comes in and points out a local area of interest, and their photograph is taken and they're standing quite closely together, and then this is published in a story, is published in Amour magazine, and that's the scandal. And Ichiro and Miyako end up suing the magazine because they're innocent and there's nothing in it, and it becomes Kurosawa's first and only courtroom drama. This is an interesting film. Again, we don't have paparazzi nowadays, so it's a difficult concept for us to understand. We're not obsessed with celebrities and what they do in their private lives or anything. So this is an interesting film. It's perhaps not one of my favourites from the first 10 of Kurosawa's career. It's perhaps not one I would revisit that often. But there is a major reason why you should check it out. It's billed as obviously a Mifune film. He's on the front cover, and it's about these two characters who are involved with this scandal. but the film is really Takeshi Shimura's film. So this is the fourth out of the run of 6 films in a row, from Drunken Angel to The Idiot, with both Mifune and Shimura. And as I've said before, for years, Mifune was always my favourite out of the two. You know, he's cooler, he's more physical. Again, he develops a nice tick in this film where he's always scratching his head and mussing up his hair, and he has a nice pipe as a prop throughout the film. But as I get older, you kind of realise that Shimura is actually the better actor. Shimura has the wider range. This is an interesting Shimura performance because, again, to me at least, and obviously I'm strange, but to me at least, Mifune is kind of the man we can never be, because he's just like so cool and so handsome and like so talented. And Shimura is kind of the man we all want to be. You know, our image of Shimura is the guy who's classy, who has dignity, who has honour, who has nobility, but not in this film. And that's what makes it such an interesting watch, because it's really, the film is about Shimura. It's not actually about the man and the woman involved in the scandal. It's about Shimura as this unscrupulous lawyer who just makes bad moral choices. He's not a bad person, because there's periods in the film where Mifune and Shirley Yamaguchi, who plays Miyako, who has that same kind of Carol Lombard scar on her cheek, coincidence? Who was later in Sam Fuller's House of Bamboo. She's wonderful in this. There's also Norika Senjoku, who's in The Quiet Jewel and Drunken Angel and Seven Samurai. But the film, for large stretches, isn't actually, it doesn't focus on the man and the woman involved in the scandal. It's about Shimura. He has a bedridden daughter. And he's desperate for money. He lives in the slums. Again, there's a wonderful scene where both Mifune and Shimura are drunk and they're kind of stoating about the slum, essentially. So there's lots of rubbish. So again, Kurosawa's making nice little post-war comments that you can slip under the censors about living conditions after the war. But Shimura in this, he's very hunched up, he's very jittery, he almost can't sit or stand still. Again, he really shows off that kind of moon face that he has, especially when the camera shoots from underneath him. It's a truly great performance, as he, because of his desperation to save his daughter, his desperation for money to do better than himself, he ends up essentially working for both sides, for one reason or another. Again, I'm not going to go into excuse me, I'm not going to go into how it ends or anything like that, or plot points particularly. Again, it's a fairly straightforward story, but it's Shimura's character that really holds it all together. There's a beautiful scene. Again, one of the criticisms of Kurosawa is he perhaps at times shares that John Ford sentimentality. Personally, I don't think he does. I think he's always just on the right side of it. But then even when he does stray into that kind of territory, he usually cuts it off and still shows you the brutality of life. He still shows you the darker side of human nature. There's a beautiful scene where later in the film Ichiro brings Miyako, because Ichiro has been visiting Shimura's daughter, and Miyako is singing Silent Night. It is actually a Christmas film. It's actually a scene of Mifune on his motorbike with a Christmas tree, which you'll probably never see again. So they take the Christmas tree to Shimura's house to cheer up his daughter, and Miyako sings Silent Night, and Shimura is overhearing this, and he just runs away and calls himself a worm and a rat because he's like struggling with this moral dilemma that he has. And Mifune and Shimura go to a bar and get drunk. I mean, there's lots of famous faces or recognisable faces from Kurosawa films in this. There's 3 of the 7 samurai in this one. And a character gets up and says, you know, next year you'll be good and next year you'll make a difference, you know. And Shimura joins in with this and goes on about how he's a rat and how next year he'll make a difference. So the film, it's really kind of about Shimura's character rather than Mifune and Yamaguchi's characters, and that's kind of what makes it interesting. Because if you took away Shimura's character, the film wouldn't be that interesting, to be honest. Again, it's of its time. It's about, again, the westernization of the press, and again the beginnings of the obsession with celebrity and celebrities' private lives. Again, we don't have that now or anything, but Shimura just walks away with the film, as is quite often the case in these early Kurosawa. I think Shimura's in 7 out of the 10 of these films, I think. So it's an interesting film. That Alex Cox's introduction on the Eureka MOC DVD is wonderful, because he makes the point of, you know, because Kurosawa, like many great artists, was a complicated guy. The fact that he was kind of a socialist, but the reason, you know, Toho was in strike, so he went to another studio to do Scandal. He did Rashomon with another studio for Deo, I think. So instead of like standing and going on strike with all the other Toho members, he just went to other studios and made films, and then went back to Toho once the strike was over. So he was kind of, he did have all these different sides to his character, like most kind of great artists did have, and he was kind of flexible, and obviously he was driven as an artist, so things like strikes and stuff like that didn't kind of get in his way, because, as we all know, it's wonderful to create. So this is it's a lovely little film with some wonderful touches. You know, he shoots the office of the magazine behind that kind of crisscross wire that you see in newsstands that papers are behind. So he has the people behind that kind of wire as well. There's some really nice dissolves, transitions, wipes, compositions of characters, as you'd expect from Kurosawa. So technically, it's an interesting film to look at. Again, it's not one of the best. You know, out of this 10, you know, I would probably recommend Stray Dog and Drunken Angel and The Quiet Jewel, which is really underrated. One Wonderful Sunday and Sanshiro Sagata. But again, this, if you're a fan of Shimura just steals the show on this one. So you can let me know in the comments below if you've seen Scandal and what you think of it, and where you would rank it in the first 10 Kurosawas. So this is the final episode of Kurosawa before Rashomon. So just as a brief summation of these 10 films before he kind of blew the doors open with Rashomon as far as internationally, and being renowned, and Rashomon being a kind of gateway film into Japanese cinema to the West. Not just Kurosawa, but Mizoguchi and Kobayashi and Naruse and various other directors. So why should you watch the first 10 films by Kurosawa? I'm biased, obviously, but I think Stray Dog's almost a masterpiece. Drunken Angel isn't that far off either. The Quiet Jewel is really underrated. He has his issue films, so you have Scandal, which is about the powers of the press and kind of celebrity obsession. You have The Quiet Jewel, which was his syphilis film. You have Drunken Angel, which is his TB film, but again in the hands of somebody who's not as good at making films. These films literally would just be issue films. You know, we've all seen the Hollywood issue films, and some of them are less interesting than others. You know, he did a folk story in The Men Who Dread the Tiger's Tail. He did a propaganda film in The Most Beautiful. He also did Jaideki and Sanshiro Sagata. He did a sequel to that film. So his first 10 are a kind of mixed bag of topics, but again, he would always make different films throughout his career. One interesting thing about his first 10 is how prominent female characters are, and he has some wonderful performances by female actors. And yes, you would still have that later in his career, in Throne of Blood and Ran. You would still have strong female characters, but his films weren't as female centric. I think, you know, looking at Kurosawa's films from a distance, you would call them kind of male centric films. But it is interesting how female centric a lot of his first 10 are. Obviously the most extreme is The Most Beautiful, which is set in the female part of a factory. But these are all interesting films. Yes, they vary in kind of success as far as being really good films or not. Like I said, there's a couple that are close to being masterworks for me anyway. But again, this is not a filmmaker that started out the gate with masterpiece after masterpiece after masterpiece. You can see the building of his style, certainly from a technical standpoint. You can see the progression in dominating the camera and using the camera, shot compositions, tracks and dollies and dissolves and wipes. So again, it's a really interesting arc to get from Sanshiro Sagata to Rashomon, essentially. So for me, it's a fascinating part of the Kurosawa journey. So thanks very much for watching this series. I will be back with another Kurosawa series after I have done another couple of series, which I will be announcing shortly. So again, let me know in the comments below what's your favourite of the first 10 Kurosawa films, and again, if you've seen Scandal, what do you think of it? And hopefully you'll join me again for my future Kurosawa season, which I'll announce at the appropriate juncture in the fullness of time when all the facts have been collated. And hopefully you'll join me again for that. So this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying thanks very much for watching, I appreciate it, and farewell.